Now we are going to welcome our guest speaker of the day, Mr. Senator Jim Thomas. Senator Jim Thomas is a man that I truly look up to because I see the way God uses him and it inspires me. So please welcome him.
Thank you so much, and thank you, everyone, for being here this morning. I want to thank David for all the work he put in on this and his crew to put this celebration today together for us. And I want to thank my comrade, Representative Washburn. Thanks, Tom, for your comments too. And the singing, guys, you're so talented. I was carrying the note one time and dropped it. And I also want to congratulate all the young people for being here and participating. I really do believe, it's my opinion, that you guys are remarkable ambassadors for us at all of our universities across the state of Indiana. I think they would like to hear a little bit about what you offered up here today. I think that would be a real education for a lot of folks in the colleges today. Well, there's been a great amount said today about our Bill of Rights and descriptions of it. So I'll just give maybe a little observation, some opinions of what I think we're dealing with. I remember years ago when our Second Amendment Patriot group put together the first Bill of Rights Day celebration in Evansville, and it's been probably 15 years ago, I suppose. And back then, there wasn't anything done to carry out here. In fact, that day isn't even recognized on most of our calendars anymore, Bill of Rights Day. We have UN Day. We have Bill of Rights Day. Even most of our military calendars doesn't have it anymore. It's kind of a shame. But I remember going to Channel 14 when we was doing that first time to explain what we were putting together. And I was at the midday show. I guess that's still going on. Mike Blake.
Yeah.
And so I was sitting in the studio, just off camera, and there was a lady there that was also, I think twice a week she did a program at the time about financial matters. And so we were both sitting off camera, and Mike introduced the two of us together, and he mentioned to her why I was there and what I was going to speak about. I think this lady was probably in her late 20s, early 30s. I'll never forget, she looked at me and she says, what is that Bill of Rights? What is that about? This is an educated lady. And I said, well, you're about to exercise one of them here in a few minutes when you go up there to speak. And I just give her a little rundown on some of the basics of it. And her statement was, well, they sound important. You know, there was a song that came out in 1970. It's called, I think it's called Yellow Taxi. And the lyrics, and I won't sing it because I wouldn't put you through the endurance, but the lyrics I will recite. The chorus was, it goes something like, you don't know what you've got until it's gone. They pay paradise and put it in the parking lot. That was the title of the lyrics of the song. And we've heard that expression sometimes, you don't know what you got till it's gone. I think that's true for a lot of us. You know, sometimes we take things for granted. And I believe the Bill of Rights is probably right there at the top, because I hear folks, and I do too, you hear people all the time saying, I've got my rights, but don't you wonder sometimes if they really know what those rights are, what they scream they have, and who got it for them? You know, that war, that Revolutionary War, at the time, Great Britain had a population of 8 million people, and the 13 colonies had a population of about 2.5 million. Those numbers are kind of staggering when you figure they're going to face off at each other. And in that war, that grueling war, that unimaginable war for us, because we just can't picture what that would be like in those bitter cold winters, fighting for eight years and 4 months. It'd be just difficult for us to picture what that would be like, away from home. And in the hot summer nights, trying to get a little bit of sleep in the woods, and mosquitoes, and bugs biting you. Low on food, the cold weather, not having enough clothing to keep warm. waiting on your pay that you've been promised. You got to believe at some point, some of them had to think, is this worth it or not? But they stayed with it. And the Americans, they lost, killed in action was 6,500 is what the estimates were. These numbers I got, and the veterans, VFW magazines, a lot of times they'll put some information about all of our wars, and I think these numbers are pretty close. And you may find them changed a little bit by other reports, but 6,100 were wounded in that war, over 20,000 POWs for the Americans, and about 17,000 of them died from disease. And the British, they had a total loss of about 24,000, and the Hessians, which were the Germans that Great Britain hired to fight against the Americans too, they had about 30,000 in that war. And it was something like 6,300 of them died in action, and 5,500 of them deserted and settled in America. So they figured out what it was all about. You know, when we talk about we have our rights, we got to remember how they come about. And what a grueling battle that was. What a fight it was. And how precious these rights are that we have. They're inherent rights. We know that. Founders made sure that it was clear that these are God-given rights. They just enshrined them in a document for us. And even after the war was over and the Constitution was signed, there was still a battle on personal rights. And we had a couple of guys in this country at the time that held out, Patrick Henry and George Mason in Virginia. And Virginia was the main player in this here because they were the largest state and they divided the country at the time. And these two guys, and actually Edmund Randolph was with them. He was a representative or senator from Virginia. They weren't going to sign that Constitution without these guaranteed rights. And there was a fight between James Madison on this measure because James Madison felt that it wasn't necessary. The federal government would take care of the people. These guys would hold him out, and I wish we could have had recordings of Patrick Henry's speeches because this guy must have had a sharp tongue. In fact, Madison was scared of him. He knew that he could win people over with his ability to speak. But nevertheless, they held out, and eventually Madison realized that it wasn't going to happen without Virginia coming on board. And so he agreed, he promised that they would grant those Bill of Rights. And that's what we have. Now, you know, George Mason, by the way, a few years before that, he had written the Virginia Declaration of Rights. And there were 16 of those elements in that declaration. And our current Bill of Rights today were modeled after what he had written. And his was pretty, it was pretty specific. So we had some people at the time that was not only brave but brilliant, and they knew, I don't know how they could have such foresight to know how important it was that we had some kind of established protection from a government. They did experience, I'm sure, to some degree, what they were living in Europe. But if you think about that body of people, the men, the women, even the kids that was willing to board a ship and head out of their homeland across the wide ocean. It wasn't like catching a flight or a cruise ship. I mean, just the challenge alone of doing that. And then they set up home, set up their towns and lives. But that wasn't good enough. Big brother government across the ocean was still going to run their lives on. And against all odds, these folks said they took a stand. They said no more. And they dug in. And then we've read about it. I know all of you have. You've understood that war. In that war in particular, the odds were so great against these guys. But I think that not only was there determination to secure a better country and a better life for Americans, for citizens, for human beings, it was their faith that also gave them the strength to stay with it. I know from being in the military myself, sometimes in a battlefield you get pretty lonesome and you get pretty scared. And it takes your faith to help you keep your composure and keep yourself clear of mind. You got to have that. And these guys did. In fact, of the 39 that signed the Constitution on September 17th, 1787, 22 of those guys were veterans, military combats. That's pretty staggering. Because today, I don't know in Indiana how many veterans we have in our legislature. And our federal government, I think it's pretty slim too. Now, there's been people that have served, but I'm talking about combat, like George Washington and Governor Morris, guys like that who signed that document, that fought for what they were signing in paper into law and into our lives. So we have a great amount of things to be grateful for in this country. I know that there are always these precious protections we have are always in the crosshairs. So today, every single day. And days when you don't read about it in the paper or hear about it on the news, somebody, somewhere is working to take for it. And they've been chiseling away at these things for a long time. Whenever there's something happens with a firearm incident, rather than targeting the person that committed the crime, they go after that Constitution, that Bill of Rights, and the good citizens. Every time. That's right. And they will zero in so much so that they will go after a particular firearm that they want, because if they can just get a little bit, if they can crack this thing just a little bit, it'll be gone. And like the song says, you don't know what you got till you've lost it. I'm amazed when I hear the discussion on the news about when we have these crimes that take place, and they're horrific, it's horrible. And they talk about the gun, what it looked like. I'm amazed that in a country that claims to be so intellectual, that we're going to zero in on an inanimate object. We've had it for when Clinton, you know, guns that have a bayonet lug on it, a little piece of steel on the end of the barrel, or a conspicuous grip, or a collapsible folding stock. I've had news reporters come to me and ask me why I defend the Second Amendment and why I won't support these kind of gun controls, these incremental attacks on our freedoms. I've asked myself, well, the way you speak as though if you were to wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning, because it was hammered on this 20-round magazine, anything they could find, and they keep us focused on this argument. 20-round magazine. He said, why won't you support limiting it to 10 rounds? I said, you speak as though if you were to wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning, and somebody's standing over your bed and got a gun barrel stuck between your eyes, and you notice the gun he's got only has a 10-round magazine. That's not going to be such a bad day after all. This is how you think. And they look and stare. And it's also, these 10 amendments, there's, you know, the one about the privacy, the Fourth Amendment, and about unreasonable search in cities you're in. We see how it's been crumbled away. They pass laws and they tell us it's for our protection. So we have the Patriot Act, the Real ID Act, and all these things that you have to, you know, and now today with the electronics we have, of all of the cameras, I mean, people can videotape you no matter where you're in the shopping mall, somebody can take you, you never know. So it's even more so that we have to be very cautious and alert and keen on what's taking place so we don't lose those protections. And then with regard to the First Amendment, this is the one that's really been in the hot seat. In particular, and it's been spoken about here, about practicing our faith. And it's pretty explicit that the government is not to infringe upon your right to conscious of faith religion. But we've seen what's happened. Took away the manger scenes off the courthouse lawns. Stripped them away. Now you can have your faith, just keep it under wrap. We don't want it out there in the open. Can't pray out in the open anymore. Somebody's going to get offended. Talk about Christianity, that's a no-no. last year, about this time, just about this time last year, in Nicetown, Indiana, just east of Indianapolis. That town, small town, about 3,000 people, they put up, as always, a lit star on their tree on the courthouse there. And some guy in that town drove by, and he was irreparably damaged by seeing that star. I tell you what, that guy's dancing, somebody like that's dancing on my last nerve when I hear that. Irreparably damaged. And it got to be a big conflict. Of course, it was kind of neat how that worked out, because even his own family was on the news, and they said, well, here's the way it's going to work. This one cousin said, I'm going to put all these stars in my truck, and I'm going to drive all over town with it. And people started putting them in their yards. Now, I don't know what the outcome was on it, but this guy irreparably damaged. And about a week or so later, there was another story come out of that town where there was a 5th grader that was caught bringing drugs into a school. And I would have liked to have met this guy, because my question to him would be, what damaged you the most? That star that you've seen, or the fact that you got a 5th grader running drugs in your school? You tell me. Irreparably damaged because of that. I hear people say they were offended because they heard a prayer. This is our First Amendment right, folks. Offended? We got people in this country who will drive for miles to go someplace to get offended. A prayer offends them. Now they can leave from the most horrible, disgusting, filthy, talking comedy act and tell everybody what a great show it is. You need to go see it. Don't bother them. But a prayer offends them. You guys, some of you have heard me talk about this before, but I remember my very first night in Vietnam in my unit. I was with the 101st Airborne there. And the very first night, and I was, I got there in the middle of the day, and you're a stranger, you don't know anybody. I was asking some of the guys in my unit, when was the last time they'd been attacked? It was kind of a key issue for me. Oh, they haven't bothered us up here. They don't bother us. We're okay up here. Well, I'm glad to hear that. That night, and all during the day, by the way, there was these 175 millimeter howitzers shooting all night long, all day long, blazing away, all day long. Big boom, and you're starting to get used to these new sounds you've never heard before. Well, that night, there was still, you could still hear rockets, and you could hear the thunder of a discharge of a cannon, but it was a little bit different. And there was some guys talking, and they stopped speaking. They stopped talking. They said, "That sounded like incoming." And I'm brand new. I said, "What? Incoming?" I said, "What are you talking about?" "A round's coming in." And another one hit, and everybody started running for the helicopters, the Hueys, the Loaches. You can hear them cranking it up. I grabbed my M16, my bandolier of ammo, steel pot, ran out, and pitch dark. I had no idea where I was going, because this is brand new territory for me. And there was some officers down in a trench. Yelled at me, said, "Come on down here, soldier." So those things, those 122s, enemy fire coming in, knocking holes in the ground, sound like it split the earth open. And I got to tell you, folks, I didn't think I was going to see the morning sunrise. And there was some praying going on. I was one of them. And I didn't hear anybody complaining about hearing a prayer. I do believe that we are a long way, since we are such a long way from 1787 to 1791, and since we never experienced that, and just read about it, even if we were to see a movie, probably wouldn't do it justice, because in a battlefield, there's not just the sights and the sounds, there's the smells, there's the lonesomeness, there's the fear, there's the desperation, there's a lot of emotions you feel that makes that battlefield a battlefield. But I think today in our country, we've got people in our universities, I don't even pick them, but I think we've got people teaching our kids, and they're teaching them that our country's a bad country, and our founders were bad people, and there's no God, and religion's dangerous, and nobody should have a firearm. We should allow government to feed us and lead us around by the nose because we're not capable of doing it for ourselves. I'm glad to see all the people that's here today, because you're not that group I was speaking of. But I tell you what, we got our work cut out for us. We've had it for a long time. And it's time to stand up and speak out. You have your rights in this country. We all have our rights. But we also have our duty and obligations and responsibilities. I don't hear people too often yell, I've got my obligations. You don't hear that cry too often. We do. We do have an obligation. And I'll tell you, our first obligation is to our Heavenly Father, who give us, of all places on this planet, this country. Yeah. And we had the fortune of being born and raised in it.
Yeah. Right.
And if we don't raise a hand to protect what we've been given, and that's where the source came from. That's where it came from. Other people just secured it. But it came from our Heavenly Father, our God Almighty. So when somebody yells at you that you should talk about it, and I get told that. I get that told right here in this room when we have the town hall meetings. And I speak about this. People tell me, Senator, don't you understand the separation of church and state? My answer is, no, I don't. But I know we got it because I look at the corner we backed into here. I know we got it. But I just want you to remember that we did have God before we had government. And He's got seniority. So, you ask what's the most important of those Bill of Rights? They're all important. If you lose one, you probably lose the rest of them. I don't know if your gun rights go, it'd be a lot easier to take the other ones away. But then too, if you lose the right to speak out, maybe you wouldn't be able to shout to them about them trying to take your guns away either. So it's important. It's important that as Americans here, we need to be proud that we are blessed to be Americans. And we need to speak out. And don't be shy. Don't tuck tail.
Amen. Don't
shy away. You got a right to say your mind. They say what they want. We say what we want.
That's right.
Yeah.
So, wherever you find yourself, maybe sometime you might need to take a stand and don't be bashful about doing it. I'm kind of puzzled when we're at gatherings. I know you guys have experienced this, where maybe we're remembering somebody who died recently, and they'll say, let's have a moment of silence. I gotta tell you, that bothers me so much. A moment of silence? I'm sure God wants to hear that. A moment of silence. It may sound like I'm preaching to you folks, but I think He would expect for us to say a little thank you now and then, and maybe take a little courage, show a little iron in your spine, and say what is on your mind and what you should be saying.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whether it's to keep your gun rights, keep your right to go to church, keep your right to say something that you know is wrong when it's wrong. We've got that right. We've got that duty. We've got that obligation. Thank you.